Trudeau government wants you to mask up and be punished if you don't do it. And the trucker convoy trial continues in Ottawa. And David Krayden, journalist for the Post Millennial and Krayden's Right on YouTube, was in the courthouse 4 days this past week here covering this trial. And so a couple of big stories that are sort of all molded into one, David, right? I mean, we have this mask mandate push by the health minister in Canada, which we'll get to in a moment. But really, the trucker convoy sort of sits at the center of all of this as a metaphor for what Trudeau's Canada has been doing to its people, no?
Precisely. And I don't think there's a better description of it than it has become a metaphor for what's wrong with Canada in terms of the authoritarian measures the Justin Trudeau government has initiated, how it came down so heavy on this trucker convoy, and how it's taken two protesters and somehow elevated them to be the great leaders, the grand poobahs of this whole movement, when in fact they were just people involved in a very organic movement that happened. Truckers all came to Ottawa. There was no preparation or planning, no grand plan, no great scheme. Tamara, Lich, and Chris Barber were there. They took some control because they needed some management and organization, and both of them had those skills. But they have become the martyrs of this Freedom Convoy. They have become the victims because the government is not just after these two people, these two peaceful protesters. It wants to make an example of peaceful protest that is contrary to the policies of the Liberal government. And that's all this is about. And the prosecution can keep saying this is not about the political beliefs of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, but that's precisely what it's about. It's about people's political beliefs that collide with the political beliefs of the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau.
It's a great way to sum it up and really set the stage. So you were in the courtroom this past week. Describe for us what you saw from both the prosecution side and the defense side in this trial as we've now, I guess, into the second week of this thing.
Yeah, and I want to say before I even describe what happened, we are days behind now. This should have been the midpoint of the trial after 8 days. 16 days were scheduled for this provincial courthouse for this trial. It's way past 20 now being scheduled. I predict this trial will go into November. And this is really all about an attempt by the prosecution to wear down the defense and everybody in the courtroom with just endless information, pictures, videos. And it's really becoming just not annoying, but you wonder what is going on here. And the defense is almost pulling their hair out, saying, is there any way to shorten this trial? Should never have come to this anyway. These are charges that should have been dismissed or at least not go into a trial of a month or longer. But the prosecution continues to unroll video after video. They have a police officer on the stand who nods and says, yes, I remember that video. I recognize those snowdrifts. And it's becoming almost absurd. It's like theater of the absurd is how I describe it. But you know what's interesting, Clayton, is that every video, even the ones the prosecution is unveiling, confirms what the defense is saying about the two people being prosecuted, that they came to Ottawa with peaceful intent and consistently and constantly told everybody in the convoy to, one, act peaceably, be peaceful in your protest. Do not disturb the residents of Ottawa by doing anything that's going to cast a bad light on this protest. And listen to the police. Do not defy the police. Do not disobey the instructions of the police. Work with the police. I've heard this time after time in all of the videos, and you scratch your head saying, what is the prosecution trying to prove? What evidence have they got here? Because in all of the videos that they're showing that were broadcast at the time on Facebook and on TikTok and other social media, all confirm what the defense is saying. This was a peaceful protest, and these two are nothing more than martyrs of the Trudeau government.
So the defense is saying that these were peaceful protests. What is the prosecution saying about Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, calling them what? What exactly is their argument?
They said from day one of this that, one, this is not about their personal politics, which actually produced a few gales of laughter at the time when they said that, because it's just absurd. And two, that this is about a protest that was anything but peaceful. But they've yet to produce any evidence of that. And I don't know where they're going to produce that evidence, because the only people that weren't peaceful during this protest were the Ottawa police, the Ontario Provincial Police, and the RCMP, which at one point rode right over a woman in a walker, and several times beat up people who were protesting, including one journalist who was physically assaulted by police. The only violent people in this whole protest were the authorities. And there was no violent protest in Ottawa by any of these protesters. And I was there for the whole duration of this protest. Cold weather or not, I didn't hide in my cubicle on Parliament Hill. I didn't hide in my office like the CBC and CTV did. Never wandering out to even talk to these protesters, just dismissing them like Justin Trudeau did as a bunch of fringe elements. And Trudeau, of course, said they were a bunch of racists and misogynists. And actually, he's the one that's demonstrated racism and misogyny throughout his life. So once again, this is incredible to watch. But you know what's happening here. It's an attempt to just lengthen this trial as long as possible and hope something sticks to the wall. I've heard so many people say that. It's almost like the prosecution just hopes something is going to stick to the wall. They're throwing everything up there. Maybe something will work. So far, forget it.
Meanwhile, you talked about, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police running over a woman, in a horse over a walker. Of course, using the police to go after people that will not wear masks. This has been the argument from the Trudeau government, particularly Theresa Tam, who we heard from this week at an event where she's wearing a mask with the rest of the board, the health ministry board. They're all there in masks, encouraging Canadians now to mask up once again, and making the argument that we should enforce these things with police presence and basically rat people out if they're not wearing masks. I mean, it's like they have amnesia, and we're returning back to pre-COVID times again, going back to right as the pandemic was unfolding and these draconian measures are put in place. So what do you know about Theresa Tam's statements this week? Really got under a lot of people's skin, especially the Canadians watching our show.
Well, Theresa Tam mouthed the talking points of the Chinese government throughout the COVID crisis. She's Canada's answer to Anthony Fauci. And she reversed herself a number of times, just like Fauci did, on what was safe and what wasn't safe during the pandemic. But she's a lifelong fan of masks. There's no question about that. As you have said on Redacted several times, these masks are toxic. They're no good for you. And even if the material is okay, what is the sense of sitting there all day, breathing in your own germs and your own carbon dioxide? These masks do nothing, absolutely nothing, to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. She knows that. If she's anything as educated as she claims to be, and her statistics say she is, why does she not know this? Why is she continuing to advance falsehoods? We know now these masks did nothing to stem the pandemic. We know they are potentially toxic. The NIH in the United States admitted that early in the pandemic, that there's toxicity to these masks, that they're not safe. So what is she doing? This is a trial balloon for the Trudeau government to see what the reaction is. And I tell you, I was disgusted with that journalist in the crowd who applauded the fact they're all wearing masks when we're not in a pandemic. What are they wearing masks for?
Yeah, the journalist.
No reason for it. And he went even further and said he's really, really not happy about the fact that people are not walking around outside in masks. I mean,
wow.
Where is the mind of these journalists? It's like you said, it's like they have gone back into a time warp. We're back in January 2020, February 2020, when we didn't know anything about these masks, when we thought the vaccine that was eventually going to be produced was going to be completely safe, that we knew nothing about the future. These journalists and these government authorities are acting like we're back in 2020 again, and that they are going to get away with these mandates, that people are going to submit, and people are going to say, I guess the government knows best. I can tell you that even in Canada, that people are saying the government did not know best. The government does not know best, and we are not going to submit to these mask mandates and get vaccines for the rest of our lives, because this is madness.
Do you think that we will see mandates? I mean, I know we're starting to see a number of them popping up in different quarters, but will Canada go into a hospital or health service building mandate or public transportation mandate for masks?
I can't see how Justin Trudeau won't try it again, but I envision there's going to be a pushback that he cannot imagine and he's not thinking about. He believes the Canadians are going to be subservient to the government, that they're going to accept these mandates again, these lockdowns. I don't believe it's going to happen, but I do think he'll try. And I think the provincial governments, much like the U.S. state governments, who were so enthusiastic about locking people down, telling them what to do, while they themselves, of course, ignored all of these mandates. They ignored all of these instructions and just lived as they chose, lived as they pleased. The provincial governments in Canada will probably try this again. Maybe not Alberta and Saskatchewan, where the resistance is very high. Ontario, Quebec, other provinces will try this again. I've no doubt. But I'm telling you, there's going to be a fight on their hands. And if Justin Trudeau tries to engineer this from a federal level, he's going to get a pushback like he's never experienced before.
From your mouth to God's ears, I hope that that's the case, that people will fight back this time and say, we will not comply. That is I absolutely hope so. And you're starting to see that, I think, more and more in the United States as well. We are not going to comply with this BS ever again. David KRAYDEN, great to see you. Thanks for keeping thanks for keeping Canada honest to the best of your ability. And we'll keep an eye on what happens with this trucker convoy trial as well as the crazy Trudeau government. David, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
Hi, this is David KRAYDEN from KRAYDEN'S Right and Stand on Guard. Join the resistance. Resolve to resist. Become a member of this station. I've been practicing journalism in one form or another for over 30 years. I've worked in print, radio, and television for a lot of prestigious publications and media outlets. I was an Armed Forces Public Affairs officer. I worked in Parliament Hill. I know how Ottawa works, and I know how corrupt federal government can be. But you can play a part in opposing Justin Trudeau's government and Justin Trudeau's plans for Canada. You can become a part of the KRAYDEN'S Right resistance. Now, I urge you today, please support this station in any way you can. Ring that bell, subscribe, because that ensures you're at least going to continue to be able to watch these episodes. You'll beat the algorithm. But more importantly, I need your financial support. I hate to ask, but that's what I'm doing. I made a decision to pursue independent media because I believed it was the best possible route for me to take as a journalist and as a concerned citizen of Canada. So you can become a part of that. And at only $5, you can become a part of that on YouTube, on Substack, and with Buy Me a Coffee, a one-time donation. But I need your support. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. If you've already done that, if you're already supporting the station, thank you. But if you haven't, make that decision today